Framed, Part 4. 7th of April. Cars today. Blue Lexus, Mr. Choi, didn't stop. Carbon black BMW M5. The shiny man, would have bought coffee. Weather, rain. Note, the best bits are between the lines. In other words, they still hadn't come down the mountain. Nice Tom is supposed to come to work at 8 o'clock. When I went out to get milk at 7 o'clock, he was already there on the doorstep, staring up at the mountain. He said, "They didn't come down then?" I said, "No, they didn't." I wonder what they were doing up there. Minnie, by the way, had lots of ideas about what they were doing. They're most likely a criminal organisation setting up an impregnable mountain headquarters from where they can take over the world. "Like Shredder?" said Tom. "A bit like Shredder," she said, but people, not giant intelligent mutated rats. By now she'd put the chart of famous criminals upon her wall. Bonnie and Clyde are on there, and Al Capone, and Vincenzo Perugia, the one who stole the Mona Lisa. She spent ages looking at their faces. Some people say there's a criminal type, you know, that all criminals have a certain look. What do you think? She pointed to the picture of Toto Rina, the head of the mafia, and said, "Don't you think he looks a bit like Tom?" "Tom is not a criminal, he's just frustrated." "What about her? I think she looks a bit like me." She pointed to Anne Bonny, the pirate queen. She looked absolutely nothing like Minnie. After breakfast, lumpy yellow milk again, me and Tom went and stood by the car back and did some more staring up at the mountain. The big shoebox with the chickens in it was still there. Every now and then we'd hear a scratching from inside. I said, "Minnie says we can't give them names until they come out, right? But what if they won't come out until they've got names?" "How do you mean, Dylan?" said Tom. "Well, if they had names, we could call them. We can't call them if they haven't got names, can we?" "I wouldn't know how to think up names though," said Tom. "I haven't got the skills." "Well, you bought them, Tom, so we should call them Donatello and Leonardo, like the turtles." Tom smiled, and it was the most immense smile I've ever seen in my life. It totally rearranged his face, and he looked like a completely different person. "Only one thing," he said. "It could be Michelangelo, not Leonardo. Michelangelo is the party dude." So we called Michelangelo Donatello. At the minute we said it, this tiny, feathery black head peeked out of the box. Tom went, "Yes, look at that." The feathery head went back in again, obviously. I started calling them quietly again. In case you don't know, by the way, Donatello is a clever turtle. Raphael is the angry turtle. Michelangelo is the party dude. Everyone usually likes Michelangelo to start with. He's the one who eats lots of pizza and says, "I like to party. Doing un huffy patio." Most people think he says it too often, like about 10 times in each episode, which means if you were watching it on Cartoon Network, he might say it like 50 times before breakfast. So they tend to move on from Michelangelo, but not Tom, because he's so loyal. All the way to school that morning, I just kept looking up at the mountain behind me, in case the cars came back down. They didn't, and the longer they didn't, the more amazing it was. "Told you," said Minnie. "International criminal organisation. They're probably setting up their satellite tracking station as we speak." I said, "The police won't let them." "Bought them off," said Minnie. "Our policeman is Sergeant Hunter. We only really see him once a year when he comes up from Blaino to do cycling proficiency with Year 6. He didn't seem the type that you could buy off. But then, as Minnie pointed out, if an international criminal organisation wanted to build a satellite tracking station, what could Sergeant Hunter do about it? Our school is twinned with a school in Malawi called Gumbi. We saved up and bought their school a computer and a modem so we could all swap emails once a week. We're supposed to pick one person and write them an email about life in Manad. We were each given a photograph of someone to write to. Mine was a boy called George. The photo showed him holding a football with a whole bunch of mates under a sign that said, "Welcome to Gumbi." So that's two differences between Gumbi and Manad. Gumbi's got boys and Gumbi's got a sign. This is Minnie's email to Gumbi. It was to a girl named Nellie. "Dear Nellie, we live in a small town at the bottom of a big mountain. In the old days there was a famous quarry at the top of the mountain. The men who worked up there had to get up at 5 in the morning to walk to the quarry. They put little white stones all along the path so that they could see their way in the dark. 100 years ago there were 4,000 men working. up there. 4,000 men walked up the mountain road past the Mrs. Selwood's place. It's amazing to think of it. When they got there, they mostly made slate for roofs. They used to bring the slate out and cut it into tiles out in the open. There were different kinds of tiles, such as Empress, Duchess, Countess, and White Ladies. In the winter it was so cold they called it the North Pole, and they had to cut the tiles in special underground shelters called carbon corn. That's why they got sick, because they cut the slate indoors. The dust went straight into their lungs. They were mostly dead before they were 50. That doesn't sound that young, but it means that hardly anyone in manhood has a granddad. Nowadays, manhood has the lowest crime rate in the United Kingdom, but back then it was more interesting. An infamous and bloody murder was done in one of the cabin in 1898. What happened was, Thomas Jones and Mary Bruton, aged 33, were walking back over the top when, and Mrs. Stannard deleted all the rest, so it must have been horrible. The email ended up with Minnie saying, "Let us all know about Gumby, especially any infamous and bloody murders." So that's what Minnie wrote, and this is what I wrote. We saw a BMW, a Nissan and 2 combi vans go up the mountain road. That's all I could think about. Miss Stannard said, "It's a bit thin, Dylan, not very interesting." "How can you say that? They went up and they didn't come back down. That means they stayed up there all night. Where did they sleep? There's no houses up there except for the old one by the mine." "Did they go down the mine? What are they doing up there? They could have an underground lair." "Why didn't you say all that then?" "I just did. I meant in your letter." "Well, it's sort of between the lines." "Well," she said, smiling, "let's sort of put it on top of the lines then, shall we?" So I wrote, "We saw a BMW, a Nissan and 2 vans go up the mountain road, and they haven't come down again yet." Mrs. Stannard said it was still quite sparse and asked me to try and add to it for homework. "I know you've got new chickens, you could write about them." Miss Stannard said perhaps I'd better take my email home with me and finish it there. Maybe you'll find something more interesting to write about. She was right about that anyway. When we got back to the garage, the chickens were on the grass by the open sign. Mum had found an old rabbit hutch for them to shelter in, so they mostly stayed in there. Sometimes they'd come out, but they always looked nervous. When they walked, they put one foot down, then stood still and looked around like they were in a minefield. Whenever anyone opened the shop door, they ran inside. Minnie said it was because they liked the fluorescent lights. We tried to chase them out again, but every time we opened the door, the pong-ping noise frightened them, and they ran off and hid behind the battery carousel. We were coaxing them out again for about the 15th time, when suddenly the door went pong-ping behind us, and we looked up, and there he was, the clean man from the BMW. "Oh," said Minnie. "Would you mind holding the door open a moment?" said Mum. He looked a bit bewildered, but he did it, and Minnie chased the chickens right past him. "Sorry about that," said Mum, all calm as if well-dressed strangers were always coming into her shop to help get the chickens out. "What can we do for you?" He was wearing the whitest shirt I'd ever seen. It was nearly luminous, in fact. He was wearing it under a blue shirt with his cuffs sticking out, so you could see that he had little shiny cufflinks. His shoes were tiny too. He was the shiniest person I'd ever seen. Even his car was shiny, which is inexplicable considering it had just come down the mountain road. "Just petrol, please," said the shiny man. I said, "I'll get it," really quickly because I was desperate to have a proper look at the car. It was only when I got out in the rain that I realised it might have been more interesting to get a proper look at the man. Anyway, in case you really want to know, the car had black and grey Napa leather seats, satellite navigation, full communications pack and about 40,000 miles on the clock. I know you probably think it's nosy of me to look at the mileage, but it's all part of market research. The 5 Series BMW sometimes develops oil consumption problems after the first 50,000 miles, so it would be good for Dad to know the mileage. I'd just finished filling the tank when Donatello jumped on the bonnet and started scraping away at the paintwork. I shooed her off before she had a chance to scratch it, but she did do her business before she left. I thought I'd better wipe it off, so I went back inside to get some tissues. Inside, the man was giving Mum his credit card. "I noticed you have a Gaggia," he was saying. "Could I trouble you for a double espresso?" Mum was great, of course. "Not at present," she said, "though very possibly in the very near future." And I said, "If he's still around in the very near future, that is." See that? Market research again, trying to find out how long he was planning to stay. "We just need some filters and some coffee and some cups," explained Mum. "We do dry cleaning." "I'll bear that in mind," said the man. "And we can get you discount tyres if you like," I said. "I've got tyres, thank you." I said, "Yes, I noticed. Say at Tornadoes. You get a better ride with Pirelli P7s. I just thought I'd mention it. that mountain road can be a bit rough. Yes,